Hey boys and girls, Perry here, and I am no one you know for story2pixel.com. And this is my SP360 rig. Kodak has a new bracket for it, so you don't have to use my homemade one anymore. You can order it off of their PixPro website. Now, the thing is you remember several months ago I did a video on how to stitch the footage from two of these together to create an actual 360 by 360. Well, since that time, this one is two SP360s, which are actually, this one's 210 by 360 and this one's 210 by 360. That's 360 round by 210 this way on both of them. Well, they've come out with something new. This is the 4K version. Now, the difference between the new one and the old one is, of course, this one has more resolution in video, not in stills, unfortunately. But this one is 360 this way by 235. The old one was 210. So I'm going to have to adjust my little template that I gave you. So I thought I would come up with a universal template. So what I did as an example is I took my little SP360 rig and I went into a little bungalow and I shot each one of the rooms and I did an HDR. So I did different exposures, both looking forward and backwards. So if you go back to my tutorial on creating HDRs and SP360s, I'll show you how to get up with a good exposure for that. Good, strong digital negative. So for brevity's sake, I am just going to skip all the HDR stuff and just do the good exposure of the front and the rear camera in the living room. First thing we're going to do is we're going to open both of these up in Photoshop because they need to be converted. Right now, there are fisheyes. If you try to wrap this into a sphere, it's going to be severely distorted. What we had to do is change just the distortion on the polar coordinates. So we need to take all the center pixels and put them at the top, basically, is what happens. And it distorts everything around. So it's real easy. Just go up to Filter, and then Distort, and then Polar Coordinates. And there is two different ways of doing it. There is rectangular to polar, which is not right because this is actually round, so we need to change it to polar to rectangular. Hit OK, and then save it as a ping. Save as. And into the same folder. None. And then close. Okay, same thing with this one. Since we've already used the polar coordinates filter, it's right here at the top. We can just hit it again and then save as again. And then save it as a ping. Same spot. Okay. And that's all we needed Photoshop for. Okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to have this, and we're going to take the template file that you're going to download from my website and duplicate it because you want to keep your master so you don't have to keep going to the website to download it. I'm just going to call this new. Okay, so now let's open up new. Okay, we have blackness here. Make sure this is highlighted over here, and make sure the user data is on. So we need to bring in the front and the rear cameras. So I'm going to go over here, front, and I've already come over here and found my way to it. So we want the ping. Make sure the polar distortion is applied. No. And let's go ahead and do the rear. And you see it's already populating it. And let's do the rear. Same thing. 2 rear ping open. No. Okay, now this is one thing. First thing you see here, flip view, used to reorient view right side up. If the view is upside down, just turn that, click it. Now, this one right here, camera on, texture bake off. So if you are going to use this camera setup that I have, actually it's a Cineversity camera setup, you need to have this checked on. And the reason for that is if you're doing a texture bake, this is being applied to a sphere on both ends, But the thing is instead of using a camera, which will take a picture, it's actually going to be making reflection off of a sphere, which means everything is backwards. So I know that originally here is the kitchen door, should be over here, and this window should be to the left. So I am using the camera, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it on like that. And then let's do this. I can take my camera head, and I want to do all my adjustment from right over here. So I'm just going to set this to 180. Okay, now, so these are the two halves, and I need to bring them into alignment. The first thing I need to do here is decrease the opacity. Let's bring it down to 50%. What it's going to do is it's going to take one of the sides of the sphere. One of the textures is a hemisphere. So the front is on one side and the rear is on the other. And since there's overlap between the cameras, because they're 360 by 210, that means that they're overlapping 30 degrees each camera. So it'll be 30 degrees here and 30 degrees here. It's overlapping. So we're decreasing the opacity on one of them so that, and you can't see it right now, but when you take the camera field of view, and right now it's set at 50%. So when you move, you see everything sliding together. So what we got to do is bring this into something that works. Now let's bring the opacity up a little bit more, see if it makes it a little bit easier to see. And it's going to be a little bit difficult with a pen, so you may just get in there and start, get it close with a mouse, and then you're just going to have to keep tweaking with the opacity until you can get something that you can line up. So what I'm going to line up is this with this, and make sure this aligns with the other one, but you don't see that. So the easiest one I can see contrast wise is this and this. So I'm just going to bring in the camera field of view until they get pretty damn close. Now, that looks pretty good, except the angles are off slightly. One of the things that can happen is on the SP360, there is a little clear cover that a lot of times you keep on to protect the lens. If it's not screwed down all the way on one of them, there's going to be some slight differences. And let's say you build your own custom rig and the cameras are slightly crooked. You don't notice it, but there's a slight difference in the orientation. You're going to have to adjust that. So I made it easy for you. Get in here, texture rotation, open it up. It's already applied like this, and you can see what you can adjust here. This is the one we want to adjust, the pitch. So I'm just going to take, hold down Option and just use the up and down arrows so I can move it a little bit at a time. Okay, now that is pretty close. There's still a slight difference. So right now it's at 0.8 to negative. So let's try negative 0.9. And what I'm looking at is here, 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 anything that I can line up. So it's kind of like a little compromise type deal. So right now we've got the stitcher position at 0. So I can actually move the stitcher. And you can see it moving here. And then I am going to take the opacity, increase it up to 100%. And this gives me a better idea. So right now I can move the stitcher. I can move it to here. And it's right there, or I can move it all the way to this right here. And what I'm trying to do is pick the best spot. Now, what I think it is let's go ahead and I am going to adjust. Let's adjust this a little bit. Let's see if I can get it closer. So again, I'm just following my lines, trying to get something as close as possible. And I have to go back and forth, until I find something that is close to working for everything. Now, another thing, these are supposed to be pretty equal, and right now it's a little bit too much of a gap that way. And you also have to worry about camera orientation. What does it look like here? And you can see a little bit of distortion here and a little bit here. Now, if push comes to shove, you may have to actually physically move these. And let me get in here real fast. So I'm going to turn this back to 180. This gives me more geometry to play with. Let's take the stitch width and let's play with that. And actually, that is getting pretty close. I still feel that it's bowing right here. So I'm going to try to adjust this a little bit more. And I'm actually going to take it on both sides. And you just tweak it until you feel it's good. And if you knock the stitcher width all the way down, the stitcher width is, if you remember from the other one, is basically there's an alpha applied to one of the textures. So you have a front texture and a rear texture. And when I put it all the way down to 0, actually as close as I can get is 1 degree. That means 1 degree has a little bit of a gradient on it, alpha gradient, so that it allows the other one to peek through. So I'm trying to get it as close as possible with that. And let's see what we got. And I'm going to play with a field of view a little bit. Let's go to an extreme. See, this is what the field of view is doing, is it's bringing the two textures together. So let's see what this, okay. Now, if you noticed, this is supposed to be 1, 2, 3, so it's supposed to be 4 spaces. But in this one, you'll see there's a little bit of a doubling. It means we're overlapping too much on the field of view. So I'm going to back out a little bit. Bring them a little bit closer. And what I want to do is try to make this the same size as this. I'm just going to eyeball it until that might be pretty good. So now this up here looks fine. This down here looks like it's slightly off. Now that could be, let's see what we do if we tweak it a little bit. Actually, I'm just going to go to extreme and not hold option. And let's put that, let's see. Okay, that's getting pretty close. You can still see a slight bit, but that's because the stitcher width is at 1%. If I slide it over a little bit, let's see what it looks like. That's pretty clean. Now on this one, you'll notice that when I take the camera pointing up here. There is a slight difference here. Actually, it's pretty extreme on this side, but let's look straight down. We can actually, in post, we can maybe clear out the fire alarm thing. So I'm going to take this back down. Let's look at the floor because you got all these boards. Another thing we do in post is we can remove the tripod leg. So I'm going to go ahead and hit render, see what it looks like. That is actually, you can see the boards look pretty good. So let's take this, bring it back to 0, and let's look at the opposite end. Now you can see here, I took the camera, one lens is pointing to the right, one lens is pointing to the left. The problem is light sources. You have a huge light source here, and it's not matched. Therefore, we end up with a mismatch. Now, we're just looking at the center exposure of our HDRI. In the real world, I would actually go through and do the HDRI. As a matter of fact, let me go ahead and do that now. Now, this slight bit of darkness down the center, I tried it on the HDR, doing an HDR, and I'm not going to drag you guys through that. But the thing is what it is both cameras had the darkness on the edge because this is the very bottom of the lens all the way around. And so you got things that are, the way lens designs are, they're always better in the center than they are on the edges. So when you have a round fisheye 360, the worst part of the image is going to be on the very rim, on the very outside. And in this case, it put a slight darkening. Now, I think I can take care of this real easy when we get into the next tutorial, and actually the third tutorial. So stay tuned for that. Moving on. Okay, I did some tweaking, and what I have now, what I was trying to get is the floor to be as even as possible here on the horizon. So right now, this is the way it looks in one direction. Another direction. Boom. And then boom. Now, the way, the thing is Cinema 4D has guides, but they were a little tricky to use. What I ended up doing is I wanted something like Photoshop guides where I could check things that were level real fast. So what I would do is I have this set out for interactive render region, and I just pull this up because I know it's going to be straight, and I just check. It's pretty even. And I check all the edges. Then I know. Now these old homes have settled. This one actually looks pretty good on this side. If I go to here and do the same thing, you'll notice here looks pretty good across here. But here it looks like it's pulled back a little bit. So I'm saying that that's probably okay. Up here, that line goes straight all the way across, and also the tops of the windows matches the tops of the doors, which is the way it is in this old house. So I think this piece of baseboard right here is taller than this one right here. And don't forget, I'm mapping it on a sphere. So one of the things I had to do is I went into my layers and I turned on these two layers right here, sphere and layer, so that I could get into the sphere where the two textures are mapped. And I had to do a slight bit of adjustment because when I set up the camera on the tripod, the way, as small as that thing is, it's very difficult to get a proper aim on it. So I had to adjust. You can actually see this is 0.5. You can see what that does to the skewing on the floor. So I'm just going to put that back there. And also right there was a little bit that I had to adjust on that. because that's easy, because once I got the textures kind of dialed in, then I could turn the rotations on the spheres to move both of the textures at the same time. And another place I made adjustments, if I'm not mistaken, or did I? Yes, I made a slight adjustment on the Z value on the rear texture tag. And let me see here, where would I take that? Let's do this. And bring this up here like that, so I can go here and have both of them at the same time. If I'm not mistaken, I go here on the orientation, and then you can see that the adjustments that I did was on the layer here, moving it back and forth. So this is where I ended up adjusting it, because what it was is this side right here was a little bit taller than this side right here. So I moved it in Z space back a little bit, like that, to make it even. Like I said, the camera situation that it was my fault. I ended up, the way I had it mounted and the way I had the lens cap, lens protector screwed on, was not screwed on tight. So it changed things. If everything is, next time I'll remove the lens protector and everything should be fine on both cameras, and they'll both be even and everything should work out. So it's not going to be as complicated when you guys do it yourself. It's not going to be that complicated, but as long as you keep everything straight and tight and try to put it in the center of the room, and realize that if you're not in the perfect center of the room, which is a little tough to do, and if you don't have it aimed perfectly, you're going to have to make some tweaks here and there. So let's go back here to user data. So now, and we look back to here, and you can see, looks pretty good there. Looks pretty good there. So I think we're in pretty good shape here. I want to get it as close as possible, because the thing that I found is that when we map these textures to geometry, it saves a lot of tweaking if everything is as straight as possible, especially when it comes to the floors. If the floors are skewed and you're trying to do it on something that's straight geometry, and our geometry will be straight off of the floor. So I'm trying to get it as close as possible with this. All right. So I'm not going to do anything else right now. So stay tuned for the next tutorial. And this is going to be a multi-parter. Thank you very much. And I am Perry for StoryToPixel.com. Thank you.